actually first met at Ferris School. Okay, so I'm just going to go here and introduce every speaker, and then I'm going to start calling out one at a time to just begin by telling your story as you wish to tell. And then when you're finished, we go through all four of the speakers. We will then see if there's any time for questions. In the meantime, is everyone all set? Are we ready to roll? Okay, great. I am going to make it so that it's on speaker view, which means when people are talking, they're going to be filmed in the full screen. All right, so our four speakers today, we have the president of the Interfaith Workgroup. This is Tom Davis. We have Mr. Al Mills, who is a local community member, a politician, and one of the twin poets, if you've ever been lucky enough to see the twin poets, who have also, I met them at Ferris, actually, the first time. He probably doesn't remember, about 15 years ago. We have Jeff Lippincott, who is a retired now, but a former engineer. And we have Brett Lunger, who is also joining us on the phone line, who is also a veteran, and from what Tom tells me, an adventurer, an author, and has a lot to share with his experiences. So without further ado, I am going to pass it over. We're going to start with Mr. Tom Davis. So here we are with our discussion. Sit back, gentlemen, please. We don't see you, but I know that you are there, and I know that you are ready to listen to some wisdom. Tom Davis, take it away.
Thank you very much, Scott. First of all, I want to thank you for that summary of moral injury. I thought you simplified it and got it all there. So I have suggested to my companions that we briefly introduce ourselves by telling what service we were in, what unit we were in, what was our billet, or that is, what was our special job in that unit, and finally, what was the nature of the enemy that we faced mainly. So I will go through those briefly and then pass it on to Jeff, who is next on my screen. Tom Davis and I served in the U.S. Navy as a reservist, and I served with Coastal Group 34, which was a South Vietnamese coastal group patrolling the canals and the rivers in the Mekong Delta of South Vietnam in 1970. I was not with an American unit. I was an advisor to that South Vietnamese unit. My job was to accompany the major, provide coordination with air support and also medevacs and any military advice that he might need. And finally, the enemy that we faced in that area was fairly, by comparison to further north, was fairly not well equipped. We were facing guerrillas that were using carbines mainly, so a single shot kind of rifle. And so it wasn't as dangerous as some of the other veterans on the screen. And it's time for me now to pass it to Jeff Lippincott.
Tom, before I pass it to you, can you just explain when you said they were of guerrilla warfare? That might not be a word that they're familiar with.
Yeah. So you may have heard of the Viet Cong. That means Viet Communists. And they were actually nationalists. They wanted to free their country from outside domination, including the US. They were not professionally trained. They were ordinary people, peasants largely, and they were poorly equipped, but they were very passionate about defending their country. And you've heard that perhaps pajamas, that was their uniform, but that's the way peasants dressed in that area. So. Okay,
so basically an untrained, not a military person per se,
yes.
But someone who is still
right. And guerrilla tactics are mostly ambush and run. You don't want to encounter the enemy face to face because your capacity to win is very small in that condition. Okay, Jeff.
How about that? Am I there?
Yeah. Okay, that's good.
Okay. Hi, gentlemen. My name is Jeff Lippincott. I was a U.S. Navy hospital corpsman Fleet Marine Force, assigned to the 1st Marine Division, way up north. I was at the other end of the country from Tom, and we were up near what was known as the demilitarized zone. I was in the 5th Marine Regiment, and we were what was known as Bush or Grunt Marines. We were the infantry on the ground. And my job, I was there from 1969 through 1970. And my job was, the Army has combat medics, the Marine Corps gets their medics from the Navy because they're part of it. We can explain that someday if you really care. But I was a combat medic with the Marines. My job was to keep those guys in one piece. Also, it was to work on the people. We went into the villages and care for them. Our primary role, as stated, was referred to as rice denial. We were in a very rice-rich valley, and we were right off the Ho Chi Minh Trail, which was the supply route north and south for the communist cause. And they would come into the villages and beat the snot out of everybody and tell them, you know, the end of this month, we will pick up so much tonnage of rice and you will have it carried up to the hills, and it'll go north and it'll go south. So our job was to try to deny that. And also our job was to raid their strongholds up in the mountains and the foothills that surrounded us. We had DC elements, and as Tom says, they were, you know, they were lightly armed. They would carry, you know, maybe a cartridge belt, and in this case, they had carbines. My guys had AKs and what they called SKS, semi-automatic rifles. But they were not meant to engage in a long, strong engagement, because we just called air and artillery on them, and that would be it. So they would strike and run and cause casualties. We were also in what was allegedly the most landmined area in northern South Vietnam. So I had a lot of casualties, some guys stepping on landmines or bumping into them. And part of my job was, when the stuff hit the fan, if a Marine went down, it was, if you see the Wounded Warrior logo of a guy carrying another guy out, I'm the guy on the bottom. You go out and get them wherever they are. And you had 4 things you had to do in that process. Number 1, you usually had to run out there and possibly fight your way out, stop the worst bleeding, make sure he's still breathing, and then get him in. And that was never easy, because there was a bounty on corpsmen. They wanted to kill us for money. And so you'd be down working on a guy out in front of lines, and they'd rush you. And they would rush you 2, 3 guys at a whack. And at that point, it got ugly. I signed up to be a Navy corpsman because I really didn't want to have to. I was in college. I had a student development, but I no longer could stand by and watch this go on and not participate. I had worked in hospitals. I'd ridden rig, and I had hunted all my life, so a little bit of blood didn't hurt me in any way, shape, or form. And I was willing to go do that job, which was pretty messy. And I had hoped going into the game that I would get a nice assignment back behind the lines and just work in a hospital, but instead I got a grunt unit. And I had to come to grips with the fact that some days you just didn't get away with not killing anybody. And as Tom knows, we've had that conversation. I will admit that on 2 occasions I paused when I had the opportunity to kill 2 different men on 2 different occasions. There was that moment where I said, I don't have to. And I took them prisoners. And to this day, those men that I killed, those men I lost, and those men I deprived of their freedom have been a burden on my soul. But that's the nature of the beast for a corpsman. You go do the job. And that's it. I don't know what else to add to that, but we not only had the VC to contend with, but because we were so close to the border between North and South Vietnam, we had large contingents in the foothills and the mountains around us of the North Vietnamese Army, who were regularly uniformed guys, well equipped, well trained, hardened fighters, and they would come at us. And usually in numbers 3 to 4 times, if we went into an area with a company, they'd come out 3, 4 companies or more, set up an ambush and do their best to annihilate us. So Tom's war and my war differed, as most veterans, their wars differed. And that was the name of the game for almost 13 months for me.
Thanks very much, Jeff.
So
I'm going to pass the baton now to Brett.